My kid's substitute teacher asked, "Why does your child know classified information about the Pentagon?" I nearly dropped my phone in the school parking lot. The midday sun beat down on the asphalt, and I'd been scrolling through work emails while waiting for the parent-teacher conference to start. Mrs. Kowalski, the substitute who'd been covering for my son's regular teacher, Mrs. Brennan, for the past 2 weeks, stood in front of me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern mixed with something else, something that looked like fear. "What do you mean, classified information?" I asked, forcing a laugh that came out wrong, too high-pitched and nervous. I'm sure whatever Danny said, he probably just saw it in a video game or something. Kids these days, they absorb everything from YouTube and— She cut me off with a raised hand. "Mr. Cross, I need you to understand how serious this is. During our social studies lesson on government buildings, your son described in explicit detail the Pentagon's underground emergency operations center, not the public tour areas, the restricted sections. He knew about the continuity of government protocols, the secure communication bunkers 3 levels below ground, the biometric security checkpoints that don't appear on any public documentation." My stomach dropped like I'd just stepped into an elevator shaft. The parking lot suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. Other parents were arriving for their own conferences, chatting casually about soccer practice and upcoming field trips, completely oblivious to the conversation happening 10 feet away. She pulled me aside toward her car, lowering her voice even further. "He drew a map, Mr. Cross, a detailed architectural layout of classified areas. He labeled them with code designations I've never heard of, and I have a master's degree in political science. I've toured the Pentagon twice as part of academic groups. What your son described doesn't exist in any public record. The heat was oppressive, but I felt cold. Ice water in my veins, kinda cold. Danny was 9 years old. He liked Minecraft and dinosaurs and complained about having to eat vegetables. He'd never shown any particular interest in government buildings or military installations. Hell, last month I'd tried to get him interested in a documentary about the White House and he'd fallen asleep 20 minutes in. Where would he even hear about something like that? I asked. But even as the words left my mouth, I was trying to remember if I'd ever discussed anything work-related around him. I'm a software engineer for a medical records company. Nothing classified. Nothing remotely connected to the Pentagon or military intelligence. Nothing that would explain this. Mrs. Kowalski reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside was a piece of construction paper covered in my son's careful handwriting and meticulous drawings. I recognized his style immediately, the way he drew perfect right angles, the way he labeled everything in tiny capital letters. But the content made my hands start shaking. The drawing showed a cross-section of what appeared to be an underground facility. Multiple levels, each labeled with designations like Subcon 3, MCon Alpha, SIF Black Box. Corridors marked with security levels. Rooms labeled with purposes I didn't understand, but that sounded ominous as hell. Emergency broadcast override station, continuity command node, secure presidential bunker access. At the bottom of the page, in Danny's careful handwriting, "This is what Grandpa showed me. He said it's where important people go when bad things happen." My vision blurred for a second. Grandpa, my father, Robert Cross, who died 4 years ago when Danny was only 5. My dad had been an accountant for a defense contractor, or at least that's what he'd always told us. He'd retired at 65, spent a few years traveling with my mother, then died suddenly of a heart attack while gardening. We'd buried him with military honors because of his 4 years in the Army back in the 70s, but there'd been nothing unusual about his service record, nothing classified, nothing that would explain how my 9-year-old son could describe the interior of restricted Pentagon facilities. "I need to take this home," I said quietly. "Mrs. Kowalski, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." She nodded, but her expression said she didn't believe that for a second. "Mr. Cross, I have a friend who works in government security. Before I showed you this, I sent her a photo of Danny's drawing, just to see if it was real or if he'd made it up from video games like you said." Her face went pale. She called me back within an hour, told me to destroy the image immediately and never speak about it again. Said that what Danny drew matched floor plans that are classified at the highest levels. She was terrified, Mr. Cross. She said if the wrong people knew a 9-year-old had drawn this, there would be serious consequences. My mouth went dry. What kind of consequences? The kind that involve federal agencies and investigations. The kind that could put your family under surveillance. She paused. The kind that means someone with access to that information has been talking to your son. The drive home was 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. Danny sat in the back seat playing a game on his tablet, completely oblivious to the atomic bomb that had just detonated in my world. His brown hair was sticking up in the back where he always forgot to brush it. His sneakers had dinosaur designs on them. He was humming the theme song from some cartoon I couldn't identify. He was a normal 9-year-old kid who somehow knew things that could get people killed. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Mrs. Kowalski showed me your drawing today, the one about the Pentagon. That was really detailed. Where'd you learn about all that stuff?" He didn't even look up from his tablet. Grandpa told me. He shows me pictures on his computer sometimes. The car swerved slightly as my hands jerked the wheel. I corrected quickly, checking the rearview mirror. "Danny, Grandpa died 4 years ago. You were really little. Do you remember him?" "Yeah," he said simply. "He visits me after school sometimes. We look at maps together. He says it's important I know where safe places are in case something bad happens. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I pulled into our driveway too fast, tires screeching slightly. My wife Lauren's car wasn't there. She had a late shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. It was just me and Danny and whatever insanity was unfolding. Inside the house, I sat Danny down at the kitchen table. I pulled out the drawing Mrs. Kowalski had given me and spread it in front of him. Tell me exactly how Grandpa shows you these things. When does he visit? Where does this happen? Danny looked confused by my intensity. After school on Wednesdays, when I go to Grandma's house while you and Mom are at work. Grandma lets me play in Grandpa's old office in the basement. His computer is still there and sometimes the maps pop up. Grandpa told me it's okay to look at them because family is allowed to know secret things. Ice water again, flooding through my whole body this time. My mother. Danny had been going to my mother's house every Wednesday for the past year since she'd offered to watch him one afternoon a week to help with our childcare costs. She lived 20 minutes away in the house she'd shared with my father for 30 years, the house I'd grown up in. I'd been there dozens of times since my father's death and had never seen anything unusual in his old office. It was just a spare room with some boxes and old furniture, nothing that screamed classified military intelligence. I need you to stay here and watch TV, I told Danny. Don't go anywhere. Don't touch anything. I'm going to call Grandma. I dialed my mother's number with shaking hands. She answered on the third ring, sounding cheerful. Sweetie, I wasn't expecting to hear from you until tomorrow. Is everything okay with Danny? Mom, I need you to be completely honest with me. I kept my voice level but firm. When Danny comes over on Wednesdays, what does he do? Does he go into Dad's old office? A pause. Just a slight hesitation, but I caught it. Sometimes. I let him play down there. There are some old books and toys from when you were little. He likes looking at your father's things. It makes him feel close to his grandpa. That's not what I asked. Does he use Dad's computer? Does he look at files on it? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know what you're talking about. Your father's computer has been off for years. The office is basically storage now. She was lying. I could hear it in her voice, that slightly higher pitch she got when she wasn't telling the truth, the same tone she'd used when I was a teenager, and she'd claimed she hadn't read my diary. Mom, Danny's teacher called me in today because he drew a detailed map of classified Pentagon facilities. He says Grandpa showed him. He says he looks at maps on Dad's computer. So I'm going to ask you one more time. What the hell is in Dad's office? Silence. Long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from her before, small and frightened. You need to come over right now. Don't bring Danny. Come alone. I called Lauren at the hospital. She could hear the panic in my voice and said she'd leave work early to stay with Danny. I told her to keep him away from any computers or tablets, not to let him draw anything, and absolutely not to let him talk about Grandpa. She asked what was happening and I told her I'd explain everything once I knew more. The drive to my mother's house was a blur of racing thoughts and worst-case scenarios. My mother was waiting on the front porch when I pulled up, smoking a cigarette. She'd quit 10 years ago. Seeing her with one now told me exactly how stressed she was. We went inside and she led me straight to the basement door. She'd always kept it locked, claiming the stairs were too steep and she didn't want anyone falling. Now I wondered what she was really protecting. The basement was exactly as I remembered from my childhood. Concrete floor, exposed ceiling beams, my father's old workbench still covered in tools. His office was in the back corner, a small room he'd built himself with drywall and a door that had always been kept closed. My mother produced a key from her pocket and unlocked it. The room was maybe 10 by 12 feet. File cabinets lined 2 walls. A desk sat against the 3rd wall with an old desktop computer, monitor dark, but the tower humming softly. The 4th wall was covered in maps. Not regular maps. Topographical military maps with markings and annotations in my father's handwriting, satellite imagery, building schematics. Some were clearly of the Pentagon, showing angles and perspectives I'd never seen in any public photograph. Your father made me promise never to talk about his work, my mother said quietly. She was standing in the doorway, not entering the room. He said it was for our safety, that some things were classified at levels that meant discussing them could put the family in danger. But maybe it's time you knew the truth. She gestured to a filing cabinet and told me the combination to the lock. Inside were personnel files, security clearance documentation, and identification badges I'd never seen before. My father's photo on each one, looking younger and more serious than I'd ever known him. The badges showed access to facilities I recognized from news reports and spy movies. The Pentagon, Fort Meade, Quantico, various other locations marked with code names I didn't recognize. The clearance levels got progressively higher as I dug deeper into the files. Secret, sensitive, compartmented information. Classifications I'd only heard about in movies. According to these documents, Robert Cross hadn't been a defense contractor accountant. He'd been a senior intelligence analyst for the Department of Defense. 33 years of service. Specialized in threat assessment and continuity of operations planning. Which, according to a job description I found, meant he'd been one of the people responsible for ensuring the government could continue functioning in the event of catastrophic attack or disaster. The very facilities Danny had been drawing were my father's area of expertise. But Dad died 4 years ago, I said. my voice hollow. How is Danny accessing current information? My mother walked to the computer and pressed the power button on the monitor. It flickered to life, showing a desktop I didn't recognize. Government seal watermark, security warnings, a login screen that was definitely not Windows. The system was never decommissioned, she said. Your father had home access to certain networks for emergency purposes. When he died, I didn't know how to shut it down. I was afraid to touch it, afraid I'd trigger some kind of alert, so I just left it running. She clicked the mouse and files opened. Recent files, accessed within the past 6 months, building schematics, security protocols, emergency response procedures, all time-stamped on Wednesday afternoons between 3 and 5 p.m., exactly when Danny would have been here. My mother's hands were shaking. I thought he was just playing games. He said Grandpa was showing him safe places. I didn't realize he was accessing actual classified files. I thought it was just Danny's imagination, pretending to talk to his grandpa. Oh my God. The implications were crashing over me in waves. My 9-year-old son had been using my dead father's credentials to access classified Department of Defense networks for months. He'd been viewing and memorizing information that foreign governments would kill to obtain. He'd drawn it at school where anyone could see, where a substitute teacher had seen and had shown it to someone with government connections. We're screwed, I said, pulling out my phone. We're completely screwed. We need to call someone. FBI, Department of Defense? I don't even know who handles this. My mother grabbed my arm. Wait, before you call anyone, you need to see something else. She pulled a box from beneath the desk. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, filled with my father's handwriting, journal entries dating back decades. I opened one at random and started reading. The entries weren't about work assignments or intelligence analysis. They were about something else entirely, something that made the classified network access seem almost mundane by comparison. My father had been documenting what he called continuity failures, instances where classified information had been compromised, either through system vulnerabilities or human error. He'd been tracking them for years, compiling evidence that suggested the very networks designed to protect America's most sensitive secrets were fundamentally broken. And more than that, he believed the flaws weren't accidental. Someone was deliberately creating backdoors and weaknesses in the system. Someone with high-level access who wanted classified information to be vulnerable. The entries became increasingly paranoid toward the end of his life. Names of colleagues he suspected, references to meetings where he'd raised concerns that were dismissed, a growing conviction that he was being monitored, that his warnings were being suppressed, that something larger and more sinister was happening within the intelligence community itself. The final entry was dated 3 days before he died. It was just one sentence. They know I know. If something happens to me, everything is documented here. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. I found these after he died. I didn't understand what they meant. I still don't really. But I know he was scared at the end. And I know he died very suddenly for a man who'd just had a clean bill of health at his physical 2 months earlier. Are you saying Dad was murdered? The words sounded insane coming out of my mouth. She shook her head slowly. I'm saying I don't know. The autopsy said heart attack. But your father had no history of heart disease. He was on a statin as a precaution, but his cardiologist had told him he had the heart of a 40-year-old. And then suddenly, while gardening, he just collapsed. I wanted to believe it was natural. It was easier that way. But I kept these notebooks because some part of me wondered. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. This is Special Agent Levine with the FBI's National Security Division. Am I speaking with Nathan Cross? My blood turned to ice. Yes. Mr. Cross, we need to talk about your son. I understand there was an incident at his school today involving classified information. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible. How did you... Mrs. Kowalski's friend, the one she sent the photo to. She reported it through proper channels. That's protocol when classified information appears in an unauthorized location. We've been trying to track the source. The fact that your son produced it at school raised immediate red flags. I looked at my mother. She was pale, gripping the edge of the desk like she might collapse. Agent Levine, there's more you need to know. My father was Robert Cross. He worked in defense intelligence until his death 4 years ago. My son has been accessing his old computer system, which apparently was never properly decommissioned. A pause on the other end of the line. Then, in a much more serious tone, do not touch anything in that room. Do not turn off any computers. Do not remove any files. I'm sending a team to your location immediately. What's the address? I gave it to him. He said they'd be there in under an hour and that I should secure the area and not let anyone else enter. Then he hung up. My mother and I stood in that office, surrounded by 30 years of classified secrets and whatever conspiracy my father had uncovered, waiting for federal agents to arrive and dismantle our lives. Did Danny access anything else? I asked. Beyond the Pentagon schematics? She shook her head. I don't know. I don't understand how any of this works. But he's been coming here every Wednesday for a year. If the system logs everything... She didn't finish the sentence. We both knew what it meant. If the system had been logging my father's credentials being used posthumously for the past year, whoever my father had suspected of creating vulnerabilities in classified networks would know about it. They'd know a dead man's access was still active. They'd know someone was using it. They'd be looking for who. And now Danny had drawn attention to it by creating that map at school. We'd painted a target on our backs without even knowing it. The FBI arrived in 3 black SUVs exactly 42 minutes later. 6 agents in suits, plus 2 people in what looked like hazmat gear carrying equipment I didn't recognize. Agent Levine was tall and thin with gray hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen terrible things and wasn't surprised by them anymore. He took my statement in the living room while other agents secured the basement. I told him everything. My father's supposed career as an accountant, his actual career in defense intelligence that I'd just learned about, his home computer system that had never been decommissioned, Danny's weekly visits to my mother's house, the files and notebooks and paranoid journal entries about system vulnerabilities and colleagues he suspected of corruption. Agent Levine listened without interrupting, taking notes on a tablet. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that made my stomach drop even further. Mr. Cross, in the year that your son has been accessing these files, has anyone else shown unusual interest in him? Anyone trying to befriend him or get close to your family? Anyone asking questions about his activities or your father's past? I started to say no, then stopped. There had been someone. 3 months ago, a man had approached Danny at the park while we were there on a Saturday. Said he'd known my father from work, wanted to pay his respects, asked how the family was doing. He'd given me his business card, said to call if we ever needed anything. I'd thought it was just a former colleague being kind. I'd thrown the card away without thinking twice about it. What did this man look like? Agent Levine's tone had shifted. Urgent now. 50s, maybe. Graying hair, very fit, expensive suit. He knew specific details about my father, things that felt authentic. He said his name was... I tried to remember. Morrison? No, that wasn't it. Morgan. James Morgan. Levine typed rapidly on his tablet. Then he showed me a photo. Is this the man? I felt my face go numb. Yes, that's him exactly. That's not James Morgan, Agent Levine said. That's Douglas Whitmore. He's a foreign intelligence officer we've been tracking for 8 years. He specializes in recruiting assets with access to classified information. If he approached your son, it wasn't a coincidence. The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the couch to steady myself. You're saying a foreign spy has been watching my son? Agent Levine's expression was grim. I'm saying your son has been a walking classified intelligence breach for a year, and enemy agents have almost certainly been monitoring him, waiting for an opportunity to exploit the access. Your father's credentials are apparently still active on systems they shouldn't be. That access is worth millions on the black market. By having your son memorize information and reproduce it in drawings, they've found a way to extract classified data without triggering digital security protocols. It's actually brilliant. Use a child as a courier who doesn't even know he's being used. The implications were staggering. Danny hadn't just been innocently looking at Grandpa's files. He'd been targeted, monitored, possibly manipulated by foreign intelligence, and I'd been completely oblivious, thinking he was just spending quality time with his grandmother. Where is your son now? Agent Levine asked. At home with my wife. We have agents en route to your residence to provide security. Mr. Cross, I need you to understand the severity of this situation. Your son's mind contains information that multiple foreign governments would kill to extract. Until we understand the full scope of what he's accessed and who else knows about it, your entire family is at risk. The agents in the basement were bringing up boxes of files, evidence bags filled with hard drives and documents. One of them approached Agent Levine and whispered something. His expression darkened further. Mr. Cross, how much did your father tell you about his work? Nothing, I said. I thought he was an accountant until about 2 hours ago. The agent who'd whispered to Levine handed him a file. He opened it, scanned the contents, then closed it and looked at me directly. Your father wasn't just an intelligence analyst. He was the senior continuity specialist for the Pentagon's emergency operations. In the event of a catastrophic attack on Washington, D.C., your father would have been one of the key personnel responsible for maintaining government functions. He had access to information about presidential succession, nuclear response protocols, the locations of secure bunker systems, everything required to keep the country running if the Capitol was destroyed. That's why his credentials were never revoked. The system was designed so that continuity personnel could access critical networks even after retirement in case of emergency. Your father having active access after death was an oversight, but it was an oversight that created a massive security vulnerability. And now, your 9-year-old son has been swimming around in those networks for a year. The scope of what Danny had potentially accessed was becoming clearer and infinitely worse. This wasn't just building schematics. This was information about how the United States government would respond to existential threats. Chain of command, secure communication protocols, the kind of information that could let an enemy decapitate American leadership in a single coordinated strike. My phone rang. Lauren. I answered immediately. Nathan, something's wrong. There are cars outside our house, men watching. Danny's scared and I don't know what to tell him. It's FBI, I said quickly. I'm with them now. They're there to protect you. Do not leave the house. Do not let Danny out of your sight. I'll explain everything when I get home. After I hung up, Agent Levine gestured to one of the other agents. Transport Mr. Cross to his residence. I'm establishing command there. He looked at me. Nathan, I need you to prepare yourself. What happens next is going to be difficult. Your son is going to need to be debriefed by intelligence analysts who specialize in assessing compromised information. We need to determine exactly what he knows, what he's told others, and whether he's been approached by anyone else we don't know about. This will take days, possibly weeks. Your entire family will be under protective custody until we're confident the threat is neutralized. What kind of threat are we talking about? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. The kind where foreign intelligence services might decide it's easier to eliminate the source than to extract the information. Agent Levine said bluntly. Your son knows things that could alter the balance of global power. There are governments that would absolutely resort to violence to either access or suppress that knowledge. The drive back to my house was in an FBI vehicle with 2 agents who didn't speak except to communicate via radio. The streets looked normal. People going about their evening routines. I'd left for a parent-teacher conference a few hours ago thinking about what to make for dinner. Now I was returning in a federal vehicle to find my home surrounded by agents and my family thrust into a nightmare that seemed pulled from a spy thriller. Lauren met me at the door, pale and frightened. Danny was on the couch clutching his tablet, looking small and confused. Agents were setting up equipment throughout the house. Cameras, computers, communication gear. Our living room had become a command post. I explained everything to Lauren as simply as I could. My father's secret career, the active computer system, Danny's access to classified files, the foreign intelligence officer who'd approached us at the park, the fact that our son had become an inadvertent security breach of catastrophic proportions. She listened in stunned silence, occasionally glancing at Danny, who was oblivious to the conversation happening across the room. When I finished, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Is Danny in legal trouble? Could they charge him with something? Agent Levine, who'd arrived shortly after me, overheard. He approached us carefully. Mrs. Cross, your son is 9 years old. He's not going to face criminal charges, but he is a witness and potentially a victim of foreign intelligence operations. We need to understand what information he's been exposed to and ensure he hasn't been recruited or manipulated beyond what we already know. The word recruited made Lauren's face go white. He's a child. How could he be recruited? Children can be manipulated without understanding what's happening, Levine explained gently. They can be convinced that sharing certain information is a game or a secret. They can be groomed to provide intelligence without realizing they're doing anything wrong. We've seen it before, though rarely at this level of classification. Over the next 3 days, our house was essentially locked down. Agents stationed outside, windows covered, all communication monitored. Danny was interviewed repeatedly by specialists who tried to make the sessions seem like friendly conversations rather than interrogations. They'd ask him to draw maps, to explain what Grandpa's computer showed, to describe anyone who'd talked to him about his visits to Grandma's house. He cooperated cheerfully, not understanding the gravity of what he was revealing. The analysts compiled a list of classified programs Danny had accessed. It was extensive and terrifying. Emergency government protocols, secure facility locations, nuclear command and control procedures, information about how the military would respond to various attack scenarios. My father's computer had been a gateway to some of the most sensitive secrets the United States possessed, and my 9-year-old son had been browsing through it like it was Wikipedia. On the 4th day, Agent Levine called me into what had been our dining room, but was now their operations center. He had a tablet showing security footage I didn't recognize. This is from a traffic camera near your mother's house, he said. We pulled footage from the past year, focusing on Wednesday afternoons when your son was there. Watch this. The footage showed our neighborhood from above, normal suburban traffic. Then a gray sedan appeared, parking 3 houses down from my mother's. Timestamp showed it arriving 20 minutes after I'd dropped Danny off and leaving 10 minutes before I'd pick him up. Same car, same timing, every Wednesday for 6 months. That's surveillance, Agent Levine said. Professional grade. They were watching the house, timing your son's visits, likely using directional listening equipment or other methods to monitor what he was accessing. We ran the plates. Rental car registered to a shell company that traces back to a foreign intelligence front operation. My mouth was dry. So they've known for 6 months what Danny was doing? At minimum. Possibly longer. We're still analyzing the footage. The fact that they haven't acted overtly suggests they were in the intelligence gathering phase, trying to assess how much access your son had before attempting recruitment or extraction. You said extraction? Lauren had entered the room without me noticing. Agent Levine hesitated, then seemed to decide we deserved the truth. In cases like this, foreign services sometimes attempt to physically remove the asset, your son, to a secure location where they can conduct extended debriefing. It's kidnapping with the intelligence collection objective. We've prevented several attempted extractions in the past, though usually involving adult assets. Your son's age makes this more complicated. They'd need to make it look like a normal disappearance to avoid triggering an immediate international incident. Lauren's legs seemed to give out. She sat down heavily in one of our dining chairs. You're telling me someone was planning to kidnap our son? We don't know if they'd escalated to that level of planning, Levine said carefully. But it was absolutely a possibility we had to consider. That's why we've had your family under protection. We've been monitoring for any approach attempts or suspicious activity. As if on cue, another agent entered and handed Levine a phone. He listened for a moment, his expression hardening. Then he hung up and looked at us. Douglas Whitmore, the man who approached you at the park, was arrested an hour ago attempting to board a private flight out of Dulles Airport. He had surveillance photos of your son in his possession, along with encrypted communication devices and $50,000 in cash. We believe he was preparing to either attempt extraction or pass off his intelligence gathering to another operative. The timing of his attempted departure, right after your son's school incident, suggests he knew the operation was compromised. So it's over? I asked. He's arrested. So we're safe? Agent Levine's expression suggested it wasn't that simple. Whitmore's arrest is significant, but he wasn't working alone. Foreign intelligence operations are cell-based. We've identified at least 3 other individuals who were part of the surveillance network monitoring your family. We've arrested 2. The third is still at large. Until we locate and neutralize all the operatives who know about your son's access, your family remains at risk. The days stretched into weeks. We lived in our house, but it didn't feel like our home anymore. Armed agents in the living room. Encrypted phones that were our only means of communication with the outside world. Danny's playdates and school activities canceled indefinitely. Lauren had to take leave from the hospital. I couldn't work remotely because our internet was considered compromised. Our lives had been put on pause while the FBI tried to clean up a security breach that my dead father had inadvertently created and my son had innocently exploited. My mother was being housed in a separate, secure location. We weren't allowed contact because she was being debriefed about my father's work history and the contents of his notebooks. The investigation into my father's death had been reopened. Forensic pathologists were reviewing his autopsy. The FBI was examining his final journal entries, the colleagues he'd suspected, trying to determine if there was validity to his paranoia or if it had been just that, paranoia. 3 weeks into the lockdown, Agent Levine brought news. We've identified the network that was monitoring your son. 5 operatives total, all arrested or located. We've also traced the leak's origin point, how foreign intelligence discovered your father's credentials were still active. It wasn't through surveillance of your family initially, it was through network analysis. When your son first accessed the system a year ago, it triggered automated alerts that your father's supposedly inactive credentials were being used. Those alerts went to a routine monitoring station, where they were reviewed by an analyst who should have escalated them immediately. Levine pulled up a photo on his tablet. Instead, that analyst, a man named David Kowalski, contacted foreign intelligence and sold them the information. He'd been operating as a mole for 6 years, passing classified material to multiple foreign governments. Your son's access was flagged as a potential intelligence goldmine, and Kowalski brokered the information to the highest bidder. The scope kept expanding. It wasn't just my family's tragedy anymore. It was a counterintelligence case involving multiple nations and a mole inside the U.S. intelligence community. Agent Levine continued. Kowalski has been arrested. He's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony has exposed an entire network of compromised personnel. Your son accidentally tripped a wire that's helping us unravel one of the most significant intelligence breaches in recent history. That's supposed to make us feel better? Lauren asked bitterly. Our son's childhood is being destroyed because the government couldn't bother to decommission a dead man's computer access. Levine didn't have a good answer for that. He just said they were working on returning our lives to normal as quickly as possible. But normal was relative now. Danny would need years of therapy to process being monitored by foreign spies. We'd need to relocate, assume new identities potentially, because our faces were known to hostile intelligence services. My father's legacy wasn't the decades of honorable service. It was the catastrophic security failure that had put his family in danger 4 years after his death. The breakthrough came 5 weeks into our protective custody. Agent Levine arrived looking grimmer than usual. He sat us down in what had been our kitchen, but was now an interrogation room. We've completed the analysis of your father's journals and the files on his computer. What we found is significant. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Your father's paranoia wasn't paranoia. He'd uncovered a systematic effort to weaken classified network security. A conspiracy involving at least 15 intelligence personnel across multiple agencies who were deliberately creating vulnerabilities in the systems designed to protect America's most sensitive information. They weren't working for a single foreign government. They were essentially running a marketplace, selling access to classified information to whoever would pay. I felt sick. My father had discovered a treason ring, and they'd killed him for it? Levine shook his head. That's where it gets complicated. The autopsy review came back. Your father did die of natural causes. Massive heart attack. No toxins, no evidence of foul play. But the timing was extraordinarily convenient. He was scheduled to meet with the Inspector General's office 3 days after his death to present evidence of the compromised personnel. That meeting never happened. His evidence was never officially reported. His death closed the investigation before it could begin. So they got lucky, Lauren said. The conspirators got lucky that he died right before he could expose them. Maybe, Levine said. Or maybe they knew about his heart condition before he did and manufactured a situation that would trigger cardiac arrest. There are ways to induce heart attacks that look completely natural. High stress, certain drug interactions that don't show up on standard toxicology screens. We can't prove it either way. But the coincidence is troubling. What matters now is that your father's evidence, combined with Kowalski's testimony and the intelligence we've gathered from the arrested operatives, has given us enough to take down the entire network. Arrests are happening as we speak. 15 federal personnel, 7 private contractors, multiple foreign intelligence officers. It's the largest counterintelligence bust in 30 years. And it started because my son drew a picture at school, I said. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. Levine allowed himself a small smile. Your son's teacher calling it in was the thread that unraveled everything. If she'd dismissed it, or if you hadn't taken it seriously, this conspiracy could have continued operating indefinitely. In a strange way, your son accidentally saved national security by exposing a security breach he didn't know he was part of. The arrests made national news. Headlines about a massive spy ring operating inside the U.S. intelligence community. Foreign operatives expelled from the country. Classified systems being overhauled. My family's names were never mentioned. The FBI had sealed our involvement under national security protocols, but we knew we were at the center of it all. 8 weeks after Danny's drawing incident, we were finally allowed to return to semi-normal life. The agents left. Our house. We could communicate freely again. Danny could go back to school, though with a security detail discreetly monitoring him. We'd been relocated to a new neighborhood under the premise of my job transfer. New school for Danny, new hospital for Lauren, new everything, basically. But we were alive and together, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. Danny adjusted remarkably well, all things considered. He didn't fully understand what had happened, just that Grandpa's computer had been important and that some bad people had been interested in it. We told him it was handled and that he was safe now. The drawings stopped. He focused on his dinosaurs and Minecraft again, being a normal kid. Lauren and I struggled more. The violation of our safety, the knowledge that we'd been surveilled for months, the fact that our son had been targeted by foreign spies, it left scars. We started couples therapy to process the trauma. Individually, we both had nightmares about different versions of how much worse things could have been. My mother was released from FBI custody after 2 months. She'd been extensively debriefed about my father's work and his suspicions. The FBI had seized everything from his office, classified it all, and sealed it away. She was allowed to keep the house, but the basement office had been completely cleared. It was just an empty room now. She and I had a long conversation about my father, about the man I'd thought he was versus the man he actually was, about the secrets he'd kept and whether they'd been necessary or if they'd just isolated him from his family. We'd never know his full story. Much of what he did remained classified, even in death, but we could acknowledge that he'd been trying to protect something important and had paid an enormous price for it. 1 year after the incident, Agent Levine visited our new home. Social call, he said, though I suspected it was also a check-in to ensure we were stable and not planning to go public with what we knew. He told us the conspiracy investigation had expanded internationally. Evidence my father had compiled was being used in cases in 3 foreign countries. Personnel were being prosecuted. Intelligence sharing agreements were being rewritten. The reverberations of what Danny had accidentally uncovered were reshaping how allied nations protected classified information. Your father would be proud, Levine said. Everything he documented, everything he tried to expose, it's finally seeing daylight. The people he suspected are facing justice. His legacy isn't the security failure, it's the cleanup that failure enabled. Before he left, Levine gave me a letter. It was from the Director of National Intelligence, thanking our family for our cooperation and sacrifice in a matter of national security. Very formal, very official. It sat in a drawer somewhere because what were we supposed to do with it? Frame it? Show it to people we could never tell about any of this? Danny turned 10 years old. His birthday party was small, just a few friends from his new school, kids who didn't know anything about classified Pentagon drawings or foreign intelligence surveillance. He wanted a dinosaur theme. We gave him that. Let him be a kid, celebrating with cake and presents and nothing more complicated than deciding whether T-Rex or Velociraptor was cooler. Watching him blow out his candles, I thought about parallel universes. The one where I'd dismissed his drawing as imagination. The one where Mrs. Kowalski hadn't taken it seriously. The one where my father's computer had been properly decommissioned and none of this had ever happened. The one where foreign intelligence had succeeded in extracting Danny before we'd known he was in danger. We'd been lucky. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. But luck shouldn't be what protects families from catastrophic security failures. 2 years after the incident, the FBI finally declassified enough information that a sanitized version of the case could be made public. News articles appeared about a security breach involving legacy credentials that led to a major counterintelligence operation. No names, no specific details, just enough to let people know that systems had failed and been fixed. I read the articles and felt detached from them. That was us, but it also wasn't. Our experience had been personal and terrifying and traumatic. The news articles made it sound clinical and procedural. Both versions were true, I suppose. Lauren and I eventually stopped having nightmares as frequently. Therapy helped. Time helped more. Danny grew taller and discovered a love for soccer. He'd forgotten most of what he'd seen on Grandpa's computer, his young brain filing it away as unimportant information from when he was little. The therapists said that was healthy. Better to let those memories fade than to reinforce them by constant discussion. My mother sold the house. Too many memories, she said. She moved to a retirement community in Florida where nobody knew her history. She called every Sunday and we video chatted. Danny would show her his soccer trophies and tell her about school. Normal grandparent-grandchild relationship, no classified information involved. 3 years later, Danny was 12 and I caught him watching a documentary about the Pentagon. He was fascinated by the building's architecture, asking questions about how many people worked there and what they did. I watched him carefully for any sign that he remembered his own connection to the place, but there was nothing. Just normal preteen curiosity about government buildings. It was over. Really, truly over. The threat had been neutralized years ago. The conspiracy had been dismantled. The systems had been secured. Our family had survived and moved forward. But sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about my father, about the secrets he'd kept and the dangers he'd tried to warn people about dying before he could see justice done, about the grandson who'd accidentally finished his work. And I'd wonder if he somehow knew. If in whatever comes after death, he'd seen Danny stumble onto his computer and had tried to guide him toward exposing what needed to be exposed. It was a comforting thought even if it wasn't rational. The alternative, that it was all just terrible coincidence and system failure, was too random and chaotic to accept. 5 years after Mrs. Kowalski asked me why my child knew classified information about the Pentagon, I was sitting at Danny's middle school graduation. He'd grown into a thoughtful kid, good student, lots of friends, normal childhood. The principal was giving a speech about the importance of curiosity and asking questions, about how today's students would shape tomorrow's world. I glanced at Danny in his cap and gown, laughing with his friends about something on his phone. He had no idea that his curiosity and questions had once nearly cost him everything, that his innocent exploration of Grandpa's computer had exposed a conspiracy and caught foreign spies and reshaped intelligence protocols. He was just a kid graduating 8th grade, thinking about high school and summer vacation and whether his parents would finally let him get a dog. That was exactly how it should be. His childhood had been disrupted and violated for a year, but we'd protected him from the full weight of it. He got to grow up normal because adults had intervened and handled the crisis. That's what parents and teachers and FBI agents and all the systems that worked correctly had given him. Later that night, after the graduation party had ended and Danny had gone to bed, Lauren and I sat on our back porch drinking wine and watching fireflies. We'd made it. Our family had survived something that could have destroyed us, and we'd come through intact. Damaged, maybe, but healing. Together. That was the only ending that mattered. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.